Welcome to my channel. My name is Julia Billig. I'm not an art historian, but I have been studying European history and art for many years. During my travels, I write travel notes, and each of my journeys is thematic. I immerse myself in a particular era or artistic school. Today I want to tell you about the outstanding master Simone Martini, a man who accomplished a true revolution in medieval painting. This is the third story about the Sienese Artistic School, based on the 2025 London exhibition. Today we will dive into the story of talent, true friendship, and amazing artistic discoveries. To give a complete picture, I have included works by Martini that weren't in the exhibition, but without which his story would be incomplete. So let's begin. In 1284, a boy was born in Tuscany who would become a European-scale star, the most refined artist of his time, whose works still amaze us today. The first 30 years of Simone's life are shrouded in mystery. Perhaps he was born in a village near Siena, close to San Gimignano. His father, Martino, was a master at preparing arriccio, the first layer of plaster for frescoes. Simply put, Simone grew up in a family where art was a family business. According to the great poet Francesco Petrarch, a close friend of Martini, Simone was not distinguished by his appearance. Some researchers believe that we can see the master's portrait in the image of Christ before Pilate on the reverse of Duccio's Maestà, or the knight in a blue cap in the chapel of San Martino in Assisi. A character who looks with curiosity and some skepticism at the miracle of the child's resurrection. Simone probably studied in the workshop of the famous Duccio, but even then it was clear young Martini was not going to be a simple imitator. He was creating something fundamentally new. Between 1312 and 1315, the young artist regularly traveled from Siena to Assisi, the spiritual center of the Franciscan order. Imagine, a beginning master receives commissions in the most sacred place for Franciscans. It's as if a young designer were invited to design Apple's headquarters. Now you can see on the screen the frescoes from the Chapel of St. Martin in Assisi. In Assisi, Martini honed his fresco painting skills, working alongside the works of Giotto and Cimabue. He created his own special approach. Instead of Giotto's dramatic power, refined, exquisite elegance. Every detail of the costumes is painted with jeweler's precision. Architectural details demonstrate knowledge of Gothic style, and the psychological portraits of characters anticipate Renaissance art. The work in Assisi became a turning point. Here, Simone became acquainted with French Gothic through patrons connected to the papal court in Avignon. These connections would later lead him to Naples and Avignon. The frescoes of the San Martino Chapel became a model of international Gothic in Italy, showing how Sienese refinement could compete with Florentine monumentality. They remain a pearl of the master's creativity, where religious art acquired aristocratic grace. Explanation: International Gothic, in simple terms, is an artistic style of the late 14th, early 15th century when European nobility wanted an international luxury brand. In 1315, an event occurred that changed Simone's entire life. The city council of Siena entrusted him with decorating the main hall of the Palazzo Pubblico, the heart of Republican power. Imagine a young artist is entrusted with painting the main hall of Versailles. The result exceeded all expectations. The fresco Maestà became a true masterpiece of revolutionary technique. Simone was not limited to ordinary painting. He created a real semi-collage using innovative methods. In the wet plaster, the master made precise incisions and inserted colored glass plates. These fragments, like precious stones, created shimmering accents on halos and decorations. In addition to gold, Simone used tin foil, a material that gives a special silvery shine. Tin details were used for architectural elements, creating a play of different textures. Over the fresco painting, tempera paints with egg yolk were applied. This gave exceptional brightness and the finest transitions in depicting faces. The fresco was perfectly integrated into the hall's architecture. Simone took into account the peculiarities of lighting. Morning rays made the glass insert sparkle, and evening light and candles created mysterious shimmering. I saw this work in the early morning and strongly recommend visiting the Palazzo Pubblico from the very opening. It's an unforgettable sight. Martini's innovative technique was centuries ahead of its time. His semi-collage anticipated experiments with mixed techniques that would become popular only in the 20th century, similar to how Steve Jobs anticipated the smartphone era. The combination of fresco, tempera, gold, tin, and colored glass created the effect of living light, transforming the religious scene into a mystical vision. Contemporaries were amazed by the unprecedented radiance of the fresco. It seemed that the Virgin Mary radiated divine light. This revolutionary semi-collage set new standards and made Simone Martini a legend of Sienese painting. The Maestà can only be seen in Siena, and at the London exhibition, the first representative of Simone Martini's work was John the Evangelist, a work from 1320. Originally, this work was part of a triptych. There is no signature, but the exquisite use of color and elegant gilding reveal the hand of an innovative master. Simone stood out among his contemporaries for his subtlety in depicting human emotions. Notice, St. John, with tense facial features, folds his hands in a gesture that is both prayerful and mournful. Even his clothes flutter, revealing inner turmoil. The inclined head indicates that the work was once placed next to a central image, probably a depiction of the dead Christ. On the other side was the grieving Virgin Mary. Only this panel has survived, like the sole witness of a lost drama. 1326 brought a mystery that still intrigues art historians. A mysterious set of 5 panels attributed to Simone Martini appeared in the Palazzo Pubblico. Archives show Martini received only 30 lire. This caused surprise. The sum seemed too modest for an entire altarpiece. Perhaps he created only one panel or refined existing works? An interesting detail, there are no traces of hinges on the panels. This means they could be rearranged like a constructor, creating different compositions for various holidays. Analysis showed the panels were created at different times, as if several artists worked on the project over the years. Modern experts are cautious. The panels are definitely from Martini's workshop, but not necessarily painted by the master himself. In the Middle Ages, art was teamwork, and understanding this helps us learn how they created 700 years ago. Like with modern luxury brands, goods by Gucci, but not created by the chief designer himself. Let's examine them in more detail. They deserve it. Saint Ansanus, patron of Siena. In his right hand, he holds a palm branch of martyrdom. In his left, the black and white banner of Siena, symbolizing his status as the city's patron. This young Roman patrician came to Tuscany in the 3rd century to preach Christianity and was martyred in Siena. Ansanus was not just a saint, but a defender of the commune, a medieval analogue of a city patron. Simone's exquisite technique, especially the realistic manner of depicting the saint gripping his staff, earned praise from Petrarch himself. Saint Peter, Prince of the Apostles. Peter is depicted as a wise elder holding 2 keys, silver and gold, with which he opens the gates of paradise. Martini masterfully combined ancient tradition, look at the gesture of the right hand, with a revolutionary innovation. The book seems to emerge from the painting into real space toward the viewer. This detail created a 3-dimensional illusion striking for that time, a technique that would become popular only in the Renaissance era. The Holy Madonna with Child, the heart of the composition. Simone Martini filled the image of the Virgin with child, with touching tenderness. The figures are enclosed in the curve of the mantle, and each tenderly touches the other. The curved little fingers of the infant Christ and the sole of his foot, playfully pressing against his mother's wrist, are rendered with astonishing authenticity for the 14th century. Madonna with Child is the only panel that has preserved its original frame, which helps us imagine how the entire ensemble looked. St. Andrew, Apostle with a Book. This portrait demonstrates a brilliant synthesis of observation and Gothic technique. The master achieves striking material authenticity, the texture of human hands with anatomical precision, the perspective foreshortening of the tilted book and the naturally hanging bookmark tassel. Special attention is paid to the elaboration of the halo. A refined technique of chasing on gold creates relief patterns that play with light and shadow. The saint's hands are the compositional center of the work. Their enlarged scale and elongated fingers emphasize the symbolic importance of hands as an instrument of blessing. Martini uses the technique of bringing the hand into the viewer's space. The hand seems to cross the boundary between the sacred image and the real world. This artistic device anticipates Renaissance experiments and creates an intimate dialogue between the saint and the believer. Saint Luke, evangelist and artist. Luke is depicted writing his gospel, but he was also considered the first artist to paint the Virgin Mary. He lifts his pen from the page, as if in contemplation of a divine idea, a very human moment for a saint. The halo is decorated with intricate patterns executed in chasing technique. Only this panel has preserved its original reverse side, painted to resemble porphyry, an expensive purple stone, a symbol of luxury. In 1324, Simone married Giovanna, sister of Lippo Memmi, his friend and talented artist. This marriage strengthened personal and professional relationships for life. Perhaps his wife's features influenced the image of the Virgin Mary in the famous Annunciation. Her portrait has not survived, but the face of the Mother of God is distinguished by special individuality. Simone gave his bride a generous wedding gift, 220 gold florins. Today, that's the cost of an expensive car. Perhaps this was gratitude. After all, Simone was over 40 and was not distinguished by beauty. But the marriage turned out to be happy. His wife loved him passionately and remained a faithful companion until the end of his life. Lippo Memmi, friend and creative partner of Simone, was born at the end of the 13th century and studied in his father's workshop. His earliest signed work from 1317 is the Maestà in San Gimignano. The friendship between Lippo and Simone continued throughout their careers, reaching its peak in the Annunciation, which is now in the Uffizi, where it's practically impossible to distinguish the hands of the two masters. So synchronously did they work. St. Paul, from around 1330 from the Metropolitan Museum, is one of the most expressive works by Lippo Memmi. Paul is depicted with a sword, a symbol of martyrdom and spiritual feat. The work demonstrates refined elegance, exquisite palette, and subtle modeling of forms. This St. Paul shows how Lippo, working in the shadow of his great brother-in-law, developed his own artistic voice, remaining faithful to the traditions of Sienese Gothic. The work is a bright example of the refinement of the 14th century Sienese school. Simone's fame quickly spread beyond Siena. King Robert of Anjou invited him to Naples to create an altarpiece of St. Louis of Toulouse, on the left on screen. Some documents from the Naples archive mention Simone Martini Milite, Simone Martini Knight. Perhaps the artist was elevated to knighthood for personal merits. Imagine an artist knight in the 14th century. This was almost impossible and speaks of exceptional recognition of talent. In 1328, Simone created one of the most mysterious frescoes in history, an equestrian portrait of the condottiere Guidoriccio da Fogliano, immortalizing victory over the Pisans and the fortresses, Montemassi, left, and Sassoforte, right. One he had already recaptured from the enemy and rides to the second. This portrait is one of the first secular portraits of the Middle Ages. All details of Guidoriccio's clothing, his armament, and horse's harness are extremely elaborated, but there's an artistic peculiarity. The rider seems isolated from the landscape. He casts no shadows, doesn't interact with the terrain. This spatial anomaly may be a conscious decision. Guidoriccio is presented not as a participant in a specific battle, but as a timeless symbol of Siena's military valor. The portrait became a new form of political propaganda, where personal glory serves to glorify the state. In 1333, Martini created a jewel of Gothic art, the Annunciation for Siena Cathedral. This work, created with Lippo Memmi, became the embodiment of aristocratic elegance. Archangel Gabriel appears as a heavenly aristocrat in a luxurious cloak of tartar fabrics. So in the 14th century, they called luxurious silk fabrics with gold embroidery from China and Central Asia. Every fold is drawn with jeweler's precision. The Virgin Mary is embarrassed by the unexpected news. Her silhouette is full of Gothic grace. The golden background is not just decoration, but sacred space where the divine drama unfolds. The lilies between the figures symbolize Mary's purity, and the Latin words of the archangel, inscribed in the air with golden letters, make the invisible visible. Martini was the first in Italian art to show the psychology of the Annunciation, not solemn acceptance, but human embarrassment before mystery. Beauty serves truth, turning the religious subject into a poem about the meeting of earthly and heavenly. In 1340, Pope Benedict XII invited Simone to Avignon. Then it was the center of papal power. The relocation of the papal court turned a provincial town into a center of Italian culture. To the Avignon period belongs a miniature in Virgil's manuscript belonging to Petrarch. On the left on screen, imagine two great masters, poet and artist, working together on an ancient text far from their native Italy. Here blossomed one of the most touching friendships in art history. Simone Martini and Francesco Petrarch, both Italians in Provence, expats in modern terms. Petrarch commissioned Simone to paint a portrait of his beloved Laura, which unfortunately has not survived, but two beautiful sonnets remain glorifying the artist's talent. Here is one of them, Sonnet 77, translation by Robert M. Durling. Polyclitus, gazing fixedly 1,000 years with the others who were famous in his art, would not have seen the least part of the beauty that has vanquished my heart. But Simone must have been in paradise, from where this gentle lady came, saw her there, and portrayed her in paint to give us proof here of such loveliness. This work is truly one of those that might be conceived in heaven, not among us here, where we have bodies that conceal the soul. Grace made it. He could work on it no further when he descended to our heat and cold, where his eyes had only mortal seeing. Christ on the cross, around 1340. The depiction of Christ's death is reduced to the most essential. On a high cross, a fragile body bleeds onto barren earth. The laconicism is enhanced by the luxurious gilded background. We don't know the original patron, but such exquisite paintings surely would have appealed to the sophisticated clientele of the Angevin court and papal curia in Avignon. This painting is one of the most intriguing mysteries of 14th century Sienese painting. The mystical marriage of Saint Catherine, work from around 1340, long attributed to Barna da Siena, an artist whose existence is now in doubt. Modern research shows Barna da Siena is probably an artistic phantom. The name first appears in Ghiberti's Commentaries, then repeated by Vasari. It's believed that Barna could have been an incorrect transcription of Bartolo, referring to Bartolo di Fredi. Many works traditionally attributed to Barna are now attributed to Lippo Memmi and his workshop. This painting is simultaneously religious and memorial, obviously commissioned to commemorate the reconciliation of warring parties. Christ offers a ring to Catherine, his mystical bride. In the lower part, in the middle, an angel reconciles two men. On the left, Saint Margaret inclines a demon to reconciliation, with kind words and a hammer. On the right, an archangel also defeats a demon, but with a sword. The work was created shortly after the first literary mentions of the mystical marriage of Saint Catherine, making it one of the earliest artistic embodiments of this subject. In Avignon, Simone created the Orsini Polyptych, a small miracle the size of a book that hides a great secret. 4 wooden panels, each about 30 by 20 centimeters, opened like a folding accordion. This portable altarpiece was commissioned by a cardinal from the powerful Orsini family for personal prayer. Simone created a truly precious object. Scenes bathed in gold, halos are made of the finest filigree. The polyptych had a huge influence on French artists. Today, the jewel is scattered. Fragments are kept in the Louvre, Antwerp, and Berlin, a sad reminder of times when collectors didn't think about the integrity of works. The carrying of the cross is in the Louvre. The first scene strikes with dramatic force. The crowd engulfs Christ like a turbulent river. People pile on top of each other at the gates of Jerusalem. This panel is full of life and energy, emotions, and overflowing with details that other masters copied. Very interesting are the figures of Christ with an expression of infinite humility, and the figure in a scarlet dress, with arms raised in grief, Mary Magdalene. She is at the intersection of the cross. Her fate intersected with Christ, as did the fates of all those nearby, but they haven't realized it yet. The crucifixion is in Antwerp. Martini used contrasts to enhance the effect. The artist filled the plane with figures, but only Christ is allowed to breathe, which emphasizes his isolation. Flame-red Mary Magdalene clings to the cross. A soldier thrusts his spear. The Mother of God falls from grief. 2 boys in the foreground look with sympathy. How subtly emotions are conveyed. The deposition is in Antwerp. In this panel, the full impact of the moment is realized through the faces and poses of the mourners. The weight of the dead body becomes tangible. And again, amazing transmission of feelings, movement, and wonderful work with gold. At the foot of the cross, Martini depicts the patron, Cardinal Orsini, in reduced proportions since his presence represents prayerful participation, not real. The last scene completes the dramatic cycle, the entombment. The tiny painting contains about 24 figures, virtuoso mastery of miniature painting. In the center, the Mother of God holding her son's body, his dead face pressed to hers. Mary Magdalene in red cries out in despair. Technical expertise showed the landscape background was painted over the original gold in the mid-15th century, which means Martini's paintings were valued long after the artist's death. Archangel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary are in Antwerp. The reverse side of the polyptych presents the Annunciation with Martini's characteristic elegance and refinement. Every detail has meaning. Many scholars recognized in the characters a model of influence for the development of a certain taste, elegant and somewhat fairy tale-like at Franco-Flemish courts, what came to be called International Gothic. The panels also stand out for the precious materials with which they were executed. Gold in abundance. Scenes bathe in golden radiance. The halos of the main figures also consist of the finest golden filigree. Christ found in the temple, work from 1342. A small painting, almost 700 years old, a precious gem among works of pre-Renaissance Siena. In Avignon exile, Simone creates one of his most psychologically complex works. The painting is signed, Simone of Siena painted me in the year of our Lord, 1342. The story is familiar to every parent. After a trip to Jerusalem, Mary and Joseph set off for home, but 12-year-old Christ remained. Discovering the loss, they searched for him for 2 days and found him in the temple, conversing with the elders. Striking is the expression of emotions of irritation and stubbornness in the most exalted of families. Any parent can imagine the desperate search, but Christ's indignation at the reproach is also familiar. Children want freedom and consider parents overly protective. The mother's words are written in the book, "Son, why have you done this to us?" a quote from the Gospel of Luke. A universal story about inexplicable absence, parental anxiety, and youthful rebellion. This luxurious painting, 50 by 35 centimeters, became a bold psychological study, the last great masterpiece created 2 years before the master's death. Simone Martini died in Avignon in the summer of 1344. Where he is buried is still unknown. A brief entry appeared in the monastic records of San Domenico in Siena. Master Simone, painter, died at the Curia. Burial took place on the 4th day of August 1344. Vasari reports he was struck by a very serious illness and could not withstand its severity. On June 30th, Simone had already drawn up his will, obviously understanding the approaching end. The document reveals the true nature of a magnanimous man, deeply attached to his family. His wife, Giovanna, returned to Siena in 1347, 3 years later, perhaps fleeing from the Black Death, all in black, still in full mourning for her beloved Simone. Simone Martini created a refined aristocratic style that influenced the formation of international Gothic. His art became a bridge between Byzantine tradition, French Gothic, and the emerging Renaissance. His friendship with Petrarch showed the world a new image of the artist. Not just a craftsman, but an intellectual capable of communicating as an equal with the greatest minds of his time. The story of Simone Martini is a story of how talent and perseverance transform a provincial youth into a European-scale master whose works, almost 7 centuries later, still make viewers freeze in admiration.